In October 1415, the French army didn't just think they would win, they thought the battle was a formality. They had nearly 15,000 men-at-arms, the elite of European nobility, facing a starving, dysentery-ridden English force of barely 6,000. The French were wearing the apex of medieval tech, curved plate armor designed to make sword blows slide off. But Henry V wasn't planning on playing by the rules of chivalry. He was bringing a mass-produced, high-velocity solution to a hand-to-hand problem: the English longbow. History loves a miracle, but Agincourt wasn't a miracle. It was a logistical nightmare that turned into a mechanical slaughter. It's October 25th, 1415. King Henry V is in deep trouble. He's spent weeks marching across France. His men are starving, half of them have dysentery, and they are desperately trying to reach the safety of English-held Calais. Standing in his way is the Blue Wave. The French army, led by the Constable of France, Charles d'Albret, didn't just outnumber the English, they outclassed them. They had the money, the food, and the most advanced armor technology in the world. They expected to capture Henry and end the war in a single afternoon. But they made one fatal industrial error. They ignored the physics of the ground they were standing on. Let's address the biggest myth in history: the longbow. You've been told it punched through plate armor like a hot knife through butter. Fact check, it didn't. By 1415, French white armor, polished steel, was designed with rounded surfaces specifically to make arrows glance off. But the longbow wasn't a sniper rifle. It was a suppression system. Henry had roughly 5,000 archers. Each could fire 10 arrows a minute. That is a sustained rate of 50,000 arrows every 60 seconds. Even if the arrows didn't pierce the breastplate, they were hitting visors, hands, and horses. The French knights were forced to march with their heads down, blinded by the storm of steel-tipped wood, essentially walking into a meat grinder without being able to see where they were going. Henry V was a master of terrain. He chose a narrow strip of land, barely 750 yards wide, hemmed in by dense forests on both sides. This meant the French couldn't use their massive numbers to flank him. They had to come through the front door. Then, the archers did something the French considered a war crime. They drove 6-foot sharpened wooden stakes into the ground at an angle. This created a mechanical barrier. If a French horse tried to charge, it was impaled. This forced the cavalry to stop, turn back, or panic, creating a traffic jam of horses and men right at the English front line. This is the part that won the battle: the mud. The field had been recently plowed for winter wheat and then soaked by days of torrential rain. The French infantry, wearing 50 to 60 pounds of steel, had to march 300 yards through knee-deep, sticky clay. By the time they reached the English, they were physically exhausted. But it got worse. Because the back ranks kept pushing forward, the French became so tightly packed in that narrow funnel that they literally could not move their arms. It was a human crush. Men were pushed face down into the mud by their own comrades and smothered to death under the weight of the crowd. The English archers, wearing almost no armor, were light on their feet. They simply dropped their bows, pulled out mallets and daggers, and harvested the immobilized knights. The casualty counts are staggering. The English lost maybe a few hundred men. The French? Estimates range from 6,000 to 10,000, including the core of their nobility. Henry V even ordered the execution of French prisoners during the heat of the battle because he feared a second wave, a brutal decision that ended the age of chivalry right then and there. Agincourt proved that technology, plate armor, is useless if the environment, mud and funnels, negates its advantages. It was the victory of the system over the individual. In the autumn of 1415, King Henry V was not looking for a legendary confrontation. He was looking for an exit. His campaign in France had stalled after a grueling siege at Harfleur, leaving his army depleted by dysentery and hunger. He was leading roughly 6,000 men on a 250-mile chevauchée, a rapid raid, toward the safety of English-held Calais. But the French were watching. They didn't just want to stop him. They wanted to erase him. They assembled a force that represented the pinnacle of medieval military investment. Thousands of high-status knights, each a walking fortress of steel, gathered to block the road near the woods of Agincourt. On paper, this wasn't a battle, it was an execution. But the French elite were about to learn that armor is only as good as the physics of the ground it stands on.